Hello and welcome to the first episode of From the Brink, the Hitching Post podcast. My name is Clay Grossman. I'm joined by my wonderful co-hosts Colby, Reynolds, and Paul Dillinger. So our podcast, this is the Hitching Post. We're going to do a little quick introduction of everybody, say kind of where our ideologies align, our roles with the Hitching Post, sort of get into a bit of the Hitching Post name, the From the Brink podcast, and a little bit about the foundation of the Hitching Post today, and sort of get a little bit of a taste for what's to come with this podcast. So I'll start with you, Colby, our co-host here. Tell us a little bit about your background now.
So, like you said, I'm Colby Reynolds. I'm a mechanical engineering student here at Texas Tech. I transferred here after a year at community college. I'm well on my way to getting my degree in the next 2 years, but I'm a pretty solid right conservative. I believe in the America First policy, strong family values, with country's law and a biblical standpoint, pretty much with biblical foundations. I'm a Trump fan. I really am. I know it's a bit controversial these days, but I'm a Trump fan, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, and who's your like deepest conservative influence, right? Outside of maybe family.
I'd probably say Ted Cruz or Ronald Reagan.
Yeah. And what's your probably number one issue with conservatism speaking?
Probably gun rights.
Gun rights.
Gun rights,
yeah.
Or the rise of communism in the States.
Yeah. And what about you, Paul?
Okay, so I'm Paul Dillinger. I'm a dual major, mechanical engineering and history. I'm the former treasurer and vice chair of YCT, and I'm the current editor-in-chief of the Hitching Post. As far as my ideology, the joke in YCT is that I'm the token neocon, but to get a little deeper into it, I kind of agree with the fusionism kind of view that kind of took over during the 80s with Reagan. It's the fusion between libertarianism to some degree, not the full like kind of ANCAP view of it, and then also like traditional conservatism, like social conservatism. So I kind of balance all three of those points. To me, I think one of the biggest issues is fiscal conservatism, even though it's kind of on the wane. Like there really are no fiscal conservatives anymore in Congress. I don't like to describe myself as being anti-anything, but like as far as my view, I am fairly anti-populist, and I was like highly critical of Trump. And as far as the biggest conservative influence, I think probably Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, I think if we're all being a little honest with ourselves, Ben Shapiro is at least in the S tier, top as far as conservative influences go for our generation. And last but not least, myself, my name is Clay Grossman. I'm a sophomore public relations and political science major. I'm currently serving as the Vice-Chairmen of YCT at Texas Tech University. I'm also the copy editor of the Hitching Post publication, right? I'd say ideologically, I'm probably more libertarian leaning than Paul, especially when we get down to social issues, especially foreign policy. Fiscally, I probably am. I would probably say I'm the most right on this one. I'm most anti-government. I don't believe in sitting zoning laws. I don't believe in minimum wage statutes at any level. Foreign policy-wise, I think that'd probably be the staunchest disagreement between Paul and I. If I had to pick just one, I don't really think we should have been in any wars. Maybe I can argue the Gulf War probably, but at the end of the day, less foreign intervention is probably good in my view. I would say if I had to pick one conservative influence, it'd be Thomas Sowell. I remember probably the first real dense conservative book I read was Basic Economics. And I've read a few books by him now. His history of Marxism, it reads like a textbook, but if you can get through it, you'll actually learn a lot more about what Das Kapital was trying to get and what Marx was trying to get at. So above all else, I think Thomas Sowell is my number one influence. Now, we started the Hitching Post, Paul, you and I, with the help of Collegiate Network and the Intercollegiate Studies Institute. February 1st was our official launch date. Take us through the process, Paul, if you will, with the Hitching Post, getting it off the ground, and where we're kind of trying to go with our mission statement and everything like that, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, starting with a paper, we had a lot of people who were really ambitious and really wanted to get their opinion out there. The problem with that is, like, kind of honing that and not just letting people, like, not turning it into a blog and just let them say what their opinion is and throwing that on the internet. Just to kind of read off part of our mission statement. Our paper strives to move past being anti-left and begin to figure out what conservatism means at its core. And so one of the things I've really focused on as an ideal, now not to say that we always live up to this, but I try to get people not to just build up straw man arguments for the left and then so they can knock it down. I want people to, like, really, like, see what the left believes, and not just, like, what, the dumbest person on the left believes, but, like, what, intelligent people on the left believe. Look at what their core argument is, don't take it out of context, say how, like, still man their argument, and then, like, try to find fault with it. And I think that's a better way of looking at it. Like, too much, like, conservative media is junk food, and it's just, like, you hear people like, oh, Ben Shapiro owns, like, X person. Like, okay, yeah, but that person was kind of an idiot. Like, to act like there aren't smart people on the left is disingenuous, and I think we should try to engage your arguments in, like, a serious and good faith way.
Yeah, at every level. I think the one of the best things about right wingers is we do try to well, some of us at least, I can't say all, we try to build up our own arguments, because you're always sort of walking on eggshells with modern day culture with your political beliefs, right? So what we try to strive for as the Hitching Post, as young conservatives, right, is to build up our own arguments, not to straw man anyone, but to see them as they are, and to see them as they are as wrong, right? And why we can put a tentative plan there to really argue it, right? Now, the name of this podcast is From the Brink, right? What we talk about is that can be a double entendre, right? We talk about it meaning from the brink of leftism, right? From the brink of a world where we're, like we say, Colby, we're on the brink of a more socialist leaning country. So at all levels, even though we all represent three tenets of conservatism, myself probably more libertarian, Paul more of a return to neoconservatism, a little more old-fashioned with social views, right? And Colby with the new populist Trump wave, right? At any level, at all levels, we probably agree that we're on the brink of we're on the brink of a more leftist socialist country, right? But the second meaning would probably be that we're also on the brink of shifting what a conservative means, right? So what we're going to try to do is demonstrate why we're from the brink of a more left-leaning country, and we're on the brink of a more, I wouldn't say ideologically uncohesive conservative movement, right?
That is definitely an issue that we're all facing. I should also say that it's not necessarily that it's just going to be more left-wing. Like, a lot of our institutions are collapsing, and we can't blame the left. I mean, I would argue that they're contributing to this, but a lot of it is just, like, on a social level, a lot of things collapse, like the family structure, for one. I mean, the fact that, and this is the more traditional conservative part of me talking, but the fact that I think religion is down led to the, rising of the divorce rate, and also the boom in single mother births. And I think that's kind of led to a lot of the problems we have today. We have so many, kids that grow up without, like, a father in the household, or, just living with one parent. And clearly that's, manifesting some serious problems there. And then, like, to the kind of religion, like, I think, unfortunately, on the left, but growing on the right as well, people are associating their politics with their religion. And when you do that, I mean, you have basically made the government God, which is a serious problem. I think we would all agree.
Oh, yes. I think, above all else, we do not want a government type where the government is viewed as God by some people, at least to
that's how they view themselves these days. I mean, if you hear something about Congress.
It's very true. Amen and a woman to that is what I would say. But transitioning into kind of what we wanted to talk about today, we've already established sort of where we all align, right? But one of the things the GOP is now going to be facing, and conservatives at large, really, I shouldn't box everyone in with the GOP, is what does the future of conservatism look like in your view? Colby, if you got a magic wand and you could direct the GOP, if you could direct the conservative base towards one direction, what direction would you like that to go in? Where do you like to see the party moving forward in this heightened political climate and this post-presidential Trump?
Probably more, at least in Congress, more fiscally conservative. I guess stop letting the left get away with so many things, actually like stop them in their tracks. That's what I'd try to take the party to do, which would obviously, I mean, that creates strife, but I mean, we can't keep going on like this, or else it's not gonna end well.
Right. And Paul, what would you say in your mind would you like to be the future of the GOP? Where would you like us to go as a movement, just moving forward?
Well, I mean, ideally, I would like us to I think we were looking for a strongman, and we have kind of that, or we had that in Trump, which I think was really bad. Like, I was super annoyed with every politician has to go through the motions of bending the knee and act like, when he'd say something stupid, we're like, well, we have to defend it. Like, why? Like, well, I know why, because they're worried they'll get primaried because Trump was mad at them. And so, you'd get a populist, person to primary, like, well, hey, he wouldn't back Trump, so, he's a rhino, which is one of the most overused words. If I, could wave a wand and, decide what the future of the party was, I would like us, like Colby said, to be more fiscally conservative. Unlike him, though, I don't actually think it's like the Republicans weren't holding the left accountable. I mean, elections have consequences. We lost the House in 2018, and then we lost, the other two branches, or, we lost the Senate and the executive branch in 2020. So, I mean, that's just what happens. It's the consequence of it. I think we've actually become better at, we're, as a party, we're probably more unified. There's a couple who are outliers, Lisa Murkowski and Collins, but, in Collins' defense, at least, she's from a fairly blue state, so I don't expect why you'd expect her to be, really conservative. She's a product of, what her constituents want, and they want a more moderate, Republican. But yeah, I'd like us to be more fiscally conservative, and I would like us to hold the principles. Another thing I got kind of annoyed with the RBG, when she passed, when we replaced her, a lot of people kind of put themselves in a weird situations where they try to come up with an excuse for why we held the vote up for the 2016 election after Scalia died. We should have always been honest. Like, look, we control the Senate, and we are entitled to not have a vote if we don't want to. But instead they say, like, well, no, we want the people to decide, and we should wait till the election. Like, that was always a BS excuse, and it kind of hurt us when we came around because we all looked like hypocrites. I'm glad
that was pretty bad. I'm still on. I mean, now in retrospect, it would have been really bad if we waited till after the election, but it obviously, like you said, would have looked better if we waited till after the election to get the other justice in the court.
Oh, you mean with
ACB?
ACB.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, but we didn't win that election, so.
Yeah.
But I mean, no, I don't. I'm actually a little. I'm not opposed to that. The fact that we did. Well, actually, I take it back. At the time, I was just because I thought it will give the left a justification for packing the court. Now, thankfully, Joe Manchin and now surprisingly Kristen Sinema are actually both against that. So we are very grateful for Joe Manchin for
hallelujah. Joe Manchin is the savior of the Senate right now. Guys. Now, I want to ask you all both this, since we do all have different perspectives, I think, on this. Colby, how do you think the era of Trump will be viewed in the panels of history, right? And by the way, we're assuming a neutral textbook, not a leftist textbook that's writing this one, right?
That's going to be pretty much impossible, judging by the Department of Education.
Oh, for sure.
Influence. But I'm thinking it'll just be as divided as it was whenever he was in office. I'm thinking it'll be the ones who loved him, and the ones who hated him will just keep hating him.
Yeah.
And like I said, the textbook will just teach the younger generations to hate him.
And in your personal view, what do you think the era of Trump will be defined as? Right? Do you think it will be defined as good in your opinion?
I think it. One big key thing of his administration to look at that's very important to the individual is, I think, him cutting all these stupid regulations that were just taxing the crap out of businesses, and cutting the business tax too. That was huge. So the individual should be very, very happy about that, and how all these regulations aren't keeping them tied up or anything. And like I said, the business tax, they can make more money. Our economy was prospering. That's one thing that the left can't ignore. The economy was great. Texas had the largest export of oil ever, I think, in 2018. Whenever I got here to Tech. So, like I said, one thing the left won't be able to ignore is how great the economy was.
Yeah.
But the Trumpers, I guess, if you can call them that, or I guess the right, like us, will remember it as like a pretty good for the individual.
Yeah. I think it goes back to the old James Carville quote, right? It's the economy, stupid, right?
That was associated with. I mean, I know he worked for Clinton, but I thought that Clinton had said that.
He worked for Clinton, so it kind of gets boxed in with Bill Clinton on that.
I thought that was in a debate against like Clinton or Bush.
No, James Carville. I think I'm pretty sure it was James Carville who said it. Obviously, the famous political commentator and advisor. But yeah, it's the economy, stupid, right? I honestly, in your opinion, do you think Trump would have won had COVID not happened and the economy had still been at its current rates? How do both y'all feel about this? About that?
I mean, there's a good chance. I've heard some people say he would have if the virus didn't happen, but I think so. But I'm one of the believers of like there's outside forces with the election. I'm sorry, that's just how I am. That's just the stuff I've seen. That's my perspective I'm bringing to the table. But
how do you feel, Paul, as well about the Trump era as a whole? Do you think he would have won if the economy had still been the way it was in January 2020, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll go back to the original question, is like how I think like a neutral textbook would view Trump. I think if there's neutral textbooks in the future, we've already basically won. I mean, I think that is the goal. Like, I don't want them just to, give right-wing propaganda. Like, I'd like, to look at the flaws of both, right-wing and left-wing administrations. Objectively, I think, you'd have to give Trump credit for, like, the deregulations. But, I mean, larger is definitely his influence with the courts. I think they said, like, a third of, like...
Oh, federal judges.
Were appointed by Trump, and they were good. And that's really just kind of tells you how influential the Federalist Society has become.
If I may bring up, towards the end of his administration, the 9th District Court out of California started making, like, conservative rulings, didn't they?
I'm not sure. I
thought I heard of a couple, like, they got rid of the magazine max ban.
Oh, interesting.
They ruled that illegal in California. Like, the 30-round max, 5-round max thing. Yeah, they actually, like, threw that out the window, which surprised me.
So, yeah, he'll definitely have, like, be credited with some influence. Now, that has less to do with, his own ideology and just the fact that he found a good way to throw red meat at conservatives was appointing conservative judges, to his credit. Now, I think people, also forget, like, not all of his Supreme Court justices were good picks. Like, ACB was undeniably a good pick. But, yeah, Kavanaugh, like, that became a very hot-button political issue because of the Me Too, like, stuff. But at the end of the day, he's, I think, closer to Roberts than he is to, Alito.
What about Gorsuch?
Gorsuch is a very principled constitutionalist. But he does come from the Kennedy kind of school. It's like, my rulings are going to be based off what gives people more individual freedom. And that's not always completely aligned with the Constitution. The fact that, like, his most recent ruling where they read into Title IX transgender rights, and he even admitted, it's like, well, nobody would have construed this at the time the bill was written. It's like, okay, well, stop right there. That does, from a constitutional kind of originalist perspective, that should mean you're done. But he's like, but because transgenderism and sexual orientation are based on your gender, then you have to read it into that. I was like, well, that's nonsense. So, like, issues like that. Then he was also on the left side when they were, like, I mean, it's a little more complicated than this, but they, like, gave half of Oklahoma back to a Native American tribe.
Yep.
I was like,
Wait, when did that happen?
I think at the beginning of last year.
Really?
Yeah.
They just expanded a reservation?
No, I mean, like I said, it's a little more complicated. It's more of just a jurisdiction, so they said you can't... It happened because of, I think, was it an execution?
It was an old treaty that we had signed with the Native American tribe.
But the case came because they were gonna. I thought it was gonna execute, but it might have just been a guy's
it went into it was an execution. It was a criminal charge, but the reason that they were able to the Native American tribe was able to get what the land around Tulsa and it was like I think it was like a third of Oklahoma technically back was the old treaty.
But it's not like the reservation can like collect taxes on half of Oklahoma. It's just like as far as jurisdiction goes on, I guess, criminal cases. It's actually the reservation is supposed to have jurisdiction over those cases. So, but yeah, that was kind of, I mean, even Roberts was like, no, like, clearly, like, they've moved past this when they made Oklahoma a state. So I want to kind of pull it back. So, I mean, that's kind of back to the textbooks, the magical neutral textbook. I think they'd have to be very critical of Trump on like a lot of issues. I mean, and one of the most annoying thing is like people like because the left has gotten so crazy, the right would like defend anything Trump did. Like objectively, like some of these scandals were pretty bad. Like okay, a president who's in trouble for having slept with a porn star while his wife was pregnant. Like yeah, that would have been big news with anybody else. I mean, maybe with the exception of Clinton. But even Clinton got impeached over his like sex scandal.
But wasn't that prior to his administration though?
Oh, it was. Well, it was. The issue came up with during the campaign because he had somebody. But I mean, even that should be like something people are ashamed of. It was like there were so many jokes about it. No, but the issue was that he had, with this slush fund money, had paid her to keep quiet so it wouldn't hurt him during the election. Oh. Now, I agree that shouldn't be illegal because people were saying, well, that's a campaign violation. You have to report that. And I was like, well, no, because that would be saying that you could pay off women you slept with campaign money, which nobody would suggest is okay. Nobody would say like, oh yeah, you can pay off like prostitutes with campaign money. That's ridiculous. But yeah, and this isn't to say like I think we kind of forget past presidents have been pretty ridiculous. Like JFK's brother had to deport a woman because she was a Russian spy and JFK wouldn't stop sleeping with her. So it's not like Trump.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
About that.
So it's and then there was a story where like we were worried about the Russians were about to nuke us and they couldn't like tell Nixon because he was like so wasted. So basically Kissinger had to handle the situation. So like it's not like past presidents haven't been ridiculous, but we went into an era that we became Trump basically built a cult of personality around him, and we were willing to forgive so many things. And on like an objective level, I feel like we had a lot of fights that really only weakened us. Like, some of the things Trump said, I think were indefensible. Like the Elon Omar thing, like, oh, she should go back home. I'm like, okay, like, why would you associate that? Even if like deep down you're not, anti-immigrant or against, you're not a racist. Like, okay, but that's things that has been associated with like racist in the past, telling people like go back to where you came from. Like, so it was a stupid fight, and people tried to the meme, the 4D chess, like, oh well, he's trying to get the left to like get closer to the squad, so that's why he did that, so they'll force the defender. I was like, no, it was just stupid. Like,
yeah. Well, I'll say this much about Trump. You're exactly right, Paul. I think he did build a cult of personality around himself.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there's any denying that. I mean, you look at especially at his
just look at his merchandise sales.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't know. I have a pair of Trump playing cards, so I think I may have bought into that one a little bit. But I mean, you look at his 2000 campaign platform when he was running for the Reform Party, right? Really, truly, the only thing he kind of stuck with was his trade policy. I mean, he was pro universal health care. So you look at some of his beliefs. They definitely were not conservatively rooted. Now the question is
that's kind of a switchback on him though, because he was trying to get rid of Obamacare back right when he got in office, right?
He was
pushing Congress to get rid of it.
He campaigned on repeal.
And he got rid of some of it, the mandate, right?
He did sort of co-opt there, but again, he kind of had to force his hand of it. That was the issue the Republican Party was running on from basically 2010 onward.
Well, originally it was repealed, and it was repealed and replaced. So it was easy. And this is the problem with Republicans in general. They were very willing to like vote against it when Obama was president, because like, oh well, this will get vetoed, so who cares? But when it became time to like, oh yeah, we'll actually have like the power to do something, they're like, well, I don't know, like healthcare is kind of a losing issue, so why?
To be fair, I think it is a bit of a Higgsian ratchet. The Higgsian ratchet. It's basically a situation where the government gets involved in something and the people start to like it. There would be maybe initial blowback, but it kind of just sticks around, right? Because people start to like it. And so I don't.
Texas.
Yeah.
A lot of people like that.
Yeah, people like it.
I mean,
but be that as may, I think with the scandals, the pointless fights we got in with Trump, I think I'm reminded of the S-hole one a lot. I won't say it on the podcast, but
he called Haiti
Oh, yeah.
So okay. I mean, yeah. Now to that point, like I thought it was completely dumb, like the way they like, this proves he's a racist. Like, no, I mean that was just kind of, it was a dumb thing to say.
Be that as it may, what I'm trying to get at is the real testament to Trump, whether the fact that Trump built a cult of personality around himself, or that he got us involved in a lot of pointless fights, right? I think it will really come down to, and the defining element of the Trump era will be if it is a long-term damage to the GOP, right? And I think really the testament will be 2022, right? It comes down to that. I mean, there's been the stigma for the past basically since the Clinton administration, since the Republican Revolution of 1994, that the incumbent party always loses the House, right? It always loses a bunch of seats, at least in the House. Senate map doesn't really look the best, right?
Wasn't it like lose the Senate too up until 2018? Because usually it was like that. I thought.
Well, it's harder to lose the Senate just because of the way it's bifurcated. But House races, it's every 2 years. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, and it's not just since '94. I thought it's since the founding. There's only been 4 times when the ruling party didn't lose seats in the midterm.
It's definitely gotten much more pronounced. I think in the past few years. I mean, the Republican Revolution in 1994 was 60 seats. I think the
that was the first time we took the House back since FDR.
The Tea Party one was about 40 seats, and this last one was 60 seats. So it's more than likely going to happen in the House, at least in 2022.
Wait, when you say this last one, what do you mean?
I'm talking about 2018.
No,
it
was
60 seats.
No, it was 40.
It's 40 seats up for election. I'm sorry.
No, we lost 40 seats.
We lost 40 seats?
Yeah, 2018, yeah.
I thought 2018 was one of the lowest losing of for the majority party. Or
I would
the ruling party.
understand why you would think that because you support Trump, but that's not true.
I'll take it back. It was 41 seats. 41 seats.
Well, shocker, I was right.
The GOP lost it, but be that as it may, how do y'all feel the GOP can rebuild? Do you think it can rebuild in the suburbs and get back rural voters while maintaining the white working class voters that Trump very much so elevated? How do you see that happening over the next decade, or do you inversely see a continually blue wave, blue Senate, a blue House, and maybe a blue presidency for the next decade or so, Colby?
I mean, I really don't think you have to worry about the rural voters too much, because unless the left suddenly grants a bunch of farm subsidies for some reason, but
I mean, I feel like that's a real concern. I feel like they would do that.
You think? I never heard of them doing it.
Well, I think they started all those farm subsidies.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, FDR, man. It starts around then and stuff like that. So yeah, do you see the GOP rebuilding, and do you think we could win in 2022 and 2024 and beyond?
I doubt it. I really do. I'm not too hopeful.
At least for the next decade, right?
I don't know. I'm listening to some of the people, the older people I know that have been involved in politics, like my old professor, Mr. Johnson. He thinks it's very hard to see a Republican president for the rest of his, I guess, life left on Earth, which is probably a good, 20, 30 years still.
How do you feel, Paul?
I feel pretty good about it. I mean, I know there's a lot of doom and gloom, but it does depend. I feel like Trump could hurt us if he, tries to come back. And what if he runs in 2024? That'll be a nightmare. And this has been one of my biggest things. I think it's good that he got working class people involved with the party. I mean, the Republican Party is definitely a working class party now. But, I mean, it's not... The key is to do that while not alienating a huge block of voters. And that's what he did, is, he was very unappealing to suburban voters. So, it's kind of funny. Ironically, in 2020, he, increased his portion of, of the black vote, of the Hispanic vote. But he lost the white male vote because Biden was able to put a moderate quote unquote face on the Democratic Party. But why I'm pretty hopeful is I don't know about y'all, but I don't think he's going to run for re-election in 2024. I could see Kamala Harris getting primaried by literally AOC or somebody even crazier. So if it comes down to Kamala Harris, she's a horrible politician. If she's going against a Rubio, DeSantis, or even Cruz, I could very easily see Republicans having a big win. And I'm talking not a 308 electoral votes. I'm talking 330. I could see us holding on to Ohio and Pennsylvania and Florida. I mean, Florida's a pretty solid Republican state now.
Which is kind of surprising, or at least to me.
Well, I haven't
been keeping up with the trends recently, but I just know that it's been close every election I've looked at prior to this one, and this one was pretty...
Yeah, it's not that it's close. It's that the Democrats were winning for a while. Well, and Trump did win over a lot of working class people. In Ohio it's one of those ones that has been hit very hard by the loss of manufacturing jobs. But I mean, the reason like we're winning Ohio is because like their big cities have kind of been hollowed out, and it's like what happens. So like you have a lot of rural areas. Like if you look at maps of like Michigan, it's like Detroit is blue and everywhere else is red. So I could see us like winning Michigan if we can like hold on to like the suburban. Some of the suburban votes. If we could build on our, the gains made with like minority voters. And this is another thing I had an issue with. People were saying like, you have to vote with Trump because the left's gotten so crazy. Which I mean, that's a point I understand. But then they would also at the same time say like, oh, no other voter would have made gains like in like the white working class or like minority voters. It's like, wait, you're telling me two opposite things. You're saying the left's gotten crazier than they ever have, and then you're also saying like, oh no, they're like Republican would have made these gains. Like I don't believe that. I think any other Republican like look at it this way. Like when the left got this crazy in the 70s, Nixon won 49 states. When the left got this crazy, we lost by 30 like electoral votes. So it's like I think this kind of tells me how like polarizing Trump was.
He's definitely alienated some voters. The suburban vote swung in an unprecedented way. 2018 and starting really in 2016, but going into the 2020s. I say it comes down to 2022 in the House. I do see us flipping back a few seats in the suburbs now that Trump's not on the ballot, but 2024 looking out there. I mean, the new CPAC poll had Trump winning. It was a plurality. I think it was around 45% of the exit poll. Right, the candidates that Paul and I would probably agree, and Colby would agree that are more populisty than some of the other candidates. Ron DeSantis, probably who's the governor of South Dakota? Heidi Noem. Heidi Noem. Yeah, is that?
I don't know if her name's Heidi, but yeah, I know it's Noem.
Well, be that as may, and then there's definitely more a rise of populism coming in the party for better or worse. So I think the ideal candidate is someone who can kind of sort of thread the line, not do it like how Ted Cruz did it, where he alienates both sides, right? As we saw, but someone who can get the populists out, the sort of get the Trumpsters out, right? But also sort of keeps the other key groups, right? The small government minded people, libertarian people, and the evangelical voters coming out in this next decade.
I think that you should get the Trumpsters out. I mean, this is a small point, but honestly, if you get a candidate that even remotely like is similar somewhat to Trump, then you're gonna get the Trumper vote, honestly.
Yeah, but I mean, depends on like how similar. Like if you get someone too similar, you're also gonna lose like that. I mean, that suburban, white voter.
Oh no, I don't mean like the Twitter, like the stupid stuff.
Yeah,
I'm talking about like, hey, let's bring back manufacturing to states and actually like I'm going to do my job sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, I think Josh Hawley is another one who was trying to build up for that, and that blew up in his face. Which I was pretty mad about the whole like I'm going to try to like contest like the results. Like it was not going to go anywhere, and that's why I'm kind of like it's one of those pointless fights. Like, what's the point of doing it if like clearly you're not going to overturn the results of the election, and if you could, I'd say that'd be immoral because I don't think there's enough evidence to justify it. But look, I mean, I think everybody kind of knows where I stand. I'm a Rubio guy. I think he's like the best fit for the party. But at the same time, like I know there's a lot of Trump people who were specifically voting against that kind of. I mean, I think neocon's an overused term, like I said, but that's kind of what he's associated with. To the point, though, I feel like we forget like there is a sacrifice for getting some of these voters. Building up these union jobs. Like I do not think in the long run this kind of view like we have to get these manufacturing jobs back is a small one. Like I mean, look, people don't look at like the historical reason like why we lost a lot of these jobs in Detroit. Like for the longest time, it was cheaper to ship something from I think it was like from Pennsylvania to Detroit by going all the way down to the Mississippi River and going up it than it was to like go the 200 miles like it would take to go over land. Well, that's not the case anymore. Now, because of other kinds of shipping like either on road or via plane, like there's a lot of other ways to ship, and then also at the same time you couldn't do any manufacturing in the South because there was no AC, so like you would literally die if you had factories there. Well, what do we have now? Like, we have AC, so like a lot of these like manufacturing jobs, like if they hadn't gone to China, well, they go to like Texas or Florida or Georgia because
definitely Texas. Too.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Alabama, I think Alabama's leading industry now is manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean they have a lower, I don't know if standard of living is the right word, but lower per capita income. So it's like, okay, well, the wages are cheaper. They have a lower minimum wage. So That's a point to them. They have weaker unions or no unions at all. So that's another point. They have less regulations. They have better tax incentives. So, I'm sorry, but I know people I don't think it's a zero-sum game, but people need to forget look, I mean, a lot of these manufacturing jobs had become institutions where they were poorly run, they were overly regulated. Their wages were non-competitive. So other states were going to take advantage of that. I mean, it's not always we're shipping jobs over to China. I mean, Toyota they have their largest plant I think is in Texas,
San Antonio, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So
I think it's Austin. I was saying it's Austin.
Well, that being said, I think that there's more worth when we're looking at fiscal policy, future of the economy, right? Sort of things. I'm not sure that the future is returning manufacturing job. It's very much so a Hazlitt thought where you're kind of focusing on the short term gain with it, right? You bring back jobs to Detroit. What you would want to do is build up the service sector, right? The management sector, right? For the 2020s, because what we're looking at is more AI driven manufacturing solutions, right? Even more AI driven parts of the economy with service sector, right? So
you need more technicians.
Exactly, and that's an issue that I don't think left or the right is really talking about in depth, right? With putting a practical solution to the table, right? Another thing that I don't think the left and the right have kind of been talking about of sorts is the national deficit, of course, like that, things of that nature. So also the shrinking of the size of the government, right? Which is something that most people kind of generally agree. And I would say there's the New Deal Democrats who never would have gotten behind that, but there's something that you could always support the conservatives around. So I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, do y'all see there being any hope with a new populist GOP for a small government limitation, right? Maybe a return to fiscal stability. Paul, how would you feel about that move being a realistic legislation for the next decade? I guess
My biggest gripe with populism is that it's I mean, by definition it's not an ideology. It's its moral good is what the people want. For one, the people don't know what they want. People can be swayed either way on things. I mean, populists can be either left wing or right wing. I mean, you could call Bernie Sanders a populist. So as far as the populists do take over the GOP, I'm not hopeful for a balanced budget by any means, because populists they say they want smaller government, but I don't think in their heart of hearts they're willing to make any of the necessary requirements that really any Republicans are willing to. The only one who was talked about it was Paul Ryan did, and definitely Rand Paul did. Seriously, it's going to require cuts to the entitlement spending. Well, who's the most of that entitlement spending going to? Older voters who basically vote Republican, so we don't want to alienate those people. So, the left's talking about actually, spending more with new entitlements. So, to get actual real fiscal conservatives, I would like that to happen, but I'm not super hopeful that's going to happen in the next 10 years. I think we're going to become fiscally conservative when we're forced to, when basically other countries won't buy our bonds because they don't think it's a safe bet, and basically we're forced to at some point raise taxes and cut spending. That's the only thing the only way I see us becoming more fiscal conservative.
Yeah, there has to be a wave of honesty, right, amongst politicians with that stuff, that we can't on the right we can't blow out spending at the same time cutting taxes blow out spending on military issues, stuff that conservatives really generally want to see reformed. I'm talking just I know this is relatively small, but really something like a wall, right, something like that. And on the left, obviously, there's going to have to be a point where, you can't tax the rich at 90%, and also expect industries to stay in cities what industry remains in Cleveland and Detroit, cities like that.
Even if you could, and I'm not saying we should, but what people are aware, this 90% income tax over anybody making $10 million a year, AOC and Elizabeth Warren have suggested. Okay, they've done calculations of that. They said the tax revenue that would optimistically bring in, and that's assuming people don't leave, which they obviously won't, but it's $70 billion a year. Okay, well that's not enough money.
Right.
You have to broaden out the tax base, and that means basically getting rid of deductions, basically putting more of a burden on the poor, and raising taxes on the middle class. Nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, it's a very hard political sell, and that's sort of what the problem is with having two populist parties now. Right? So you have the right wing populists saying, well, we're going to bring back industry, we're going to have a lower tax base, right? So everyone can keep spending out the wazoo, which very very much so a Friedman thought right now.
Yeah.
I'm just playing there. They've kind of abandoned that, and then obviously on the left, in addition to the social culture, right, of canceling people and stuff like that. There's the fiscal side, which is hilariously bad, right? So I
New Deal.
Oh my god! Don't even get me started on that. It was published by a mistake. Our intern posted the wrong one.
Cow farts. Well, it's not cow farts, y'all.
Yeah. Well, the Green New Deal is. I honestly think the Green New Deal, AOC is just going to be remembered as one of the biggest political fails in history. The fact that AOC had all these co-signers, right, who just refused to vote on it because they knew it was a bad deal, right? It's very hilarious, and I think the fact that she failed so hard, but it does show kind of where the party is leaning towards, right?
We say like she failed, but I mean it's been adopted. I mean not her specifically, but the idea that there will be a Green New Deal. I mean Biden is pushing that, so in that sense, she kind of won, even if like her specific bill didn't get passed. Because I mean, obviously, it was ridiculous.
Her specific bill didn't get, but I think the fact that no supporters signed onto it, it shows that she really didn't have the space of the party. But that being said, and that's a good transition into something else we were going to talk about. Was the future of the Democratic Party, right? I mean, well, we've talked about this a lot in depth, right? Do we see the progressive wing sort of taking over? Do we see moderates like Joe Biden? I'm hesitant to call Joe Biden call the moderate at this point, but how do you see the DNC shifting, Colby, in the next decade or so? Do you think people like AOC are the party now, or do you think the more Kristen Sinema we're going to win in the suburbs is going to take over that?
It's more AOC. If you it's going to go so left. They got the opportunity in front of them right now. They're just going to keep gunning with it, going gun ho. Left as much as I can.
And Paul?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Colby. That's why I'm a little more optimistic because, I mean, with the exception of healthcare, I think Republicans hold winning issues on most things. And, and not to make another argument about this, but I just think, Trump, while depressing Republican turnout in some areas, in some he, massively expanded it. But, yeah, I think, but he also drove out Democrat turnout. But I think that's, a one-time thing. Provided he doesn't run again in 2024, and provided that Joe Biden can't put the quote-unquote moderate face on it, yeah, I think a lot of people are like,
There's no way he's putting on the moderate face this time around. Especially with the bringing the transgender stuff in sports, there's no way he's holding the moderate.
Well, I mean, I just don't think he's going to run again. But, I mean, people associate him with being a moderate. I mean, he's like an old white guy who, had some conservative bills, like the 1990 crime bill, or was it 94? I don't know. The crime bill. I mean, progressives kind of like to not look at that, but that was a very anti-progressive bill. I mean, just kind of the way he behaved. He was against forced busing. Kamala Harris called him a racist for it, basically, but it's neither here nor there. But yeah. I mean, AOC can't pretend to be a moderate. I mean, she'll say, oh, well, I'm actually where the middle of the country is, and, the Republicans are far right. Nonsense. As long as a Republican can not alienate, the very hardcore Trump voters, which, I mean, you say that the Trump voters will turn up, but, I mean, they didn't in Georgia. That's why we lost those Senate seats. But, yeah, I'm hopeful that the Democrats will basically alienate a lot of their voters. I don't see Sinema, and Joe Manchin's really the only true moderate. I don't see them dominating the party. I see more AOC's, more Elizabeth Warren's, more of this not only socialist but also this the critical race theory taking over. But I think if we have a massive 370 electoral vote landslide, yeah, the Democrats will be forced to be
honest with themselves, right? I'm not quite sure that I would push back on both of you. I'm not quite sure that the Democrats are going to go full on left, and they might try to push the pale with a few things that they're unified on, healthcare reform, right? But when you get into brass tacks, there is a lot of disagreement there, and when Nancy Pelosi has made this evidently clear, right, with their policy objectives, right, when they regained the House, right. She said it very clearly after they won. They won by going into suburban districts, right, and saying we're the moderate guys. Look at the GOP. They're over here crazy Trump, right. And
it was mainly just, look at Trump's tweets. Oh, man.
Okay.
Oh gosh.
Yes, they say. But what they did was they painted themselves as moderate. So we care. We care about healthcare. We care about you, the individual, right? Even though it's full of BS, they lose that when they go to these crazy objectives that are plainly obvious. I mean, that's why the Green New Deal failed. Because the moderate Democrat wing, which is still very large, I might add, now, especially now that they mainly took back the House with suburban voters, right? I don't think that they're going to push the pail too terribly hard, right? But I think it really comes down to 2024 with that, and I'll ask you about this as well. Who do y'all see the front runner as for the Democrats, right? And someone who's going to be the future of the face, right? Do you see it as a Kamala Harris? Do you see it as a Michelle Obama? Maybe
I think it's Harris. I think it's Harris.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if the DNC was able to get her as vice president whenever she didn't win, one primary vote or something, one primary endorsement?
She won any.
Yeah. If they can do that, she's definitely going to be the face of the Democratic Party now.
Well, I mean, they picked her because she she checked enough boxes, but I don't see her because she's not a very good politician. Say what you want about AOC, but she's a fairly talented politician. So I see an AOC being the future face of the Democratic Party, or was it Joe Kennedy, the third, somebody like him, some of these uber progressives. I think I mean, there will be some moderate senators, but as far as the House goes, I think they're all going to be pretty progressive until they get until they lose the massive election. That's kind of how I break it down.
No, well, the same. It's going to come back to 2022 then, because if they try to push the pail, which I think in some aspects they have, it's more of the leftist ideology as a whole right now that's kind of pushing the pail. But that being said, I mean, it's going to come down to 2022, right? If they lose in districts that they want to win, right? Texas 6, they're trying to push right now to get a good candidate out there, and if they get absolutely stomped by a 20-point swing, right? They lose in some of the suburbs of these conservative cities, like Colorado's, I think, 6th district around Aurora, which is a fairly conservative area even by our standards, right? Or suburbs of Houston, right? At least if they start losing in some of these conservative cities, right, which have more of a conservative background. Yes, I could definitely see them moderating, but I don't think that is the future right now. I don't really see them pushing the pail too terribly hard because they won this by moderating, right? They won in 2018 by moderating, and they won in 2020 by painting themselves as moderates, right? And they kind of lose that image when they try to give the party to AOC. I mean, that's why Pelosi pushed back on it to begin with, right? With her Green New Deal, and a few other of her policy objectives, right?
Well, I mean, she tried to, but I mean, she almost instantly had to back down. I mean, the same thing that happened with us. I think there's a lot more people who are highly skeptical of Trump, but in the Republican Party, but they just can't say it because of the blowback. So just the same thing. I mean, I'm sure Nancy Pelosi thinks AOC is kind of dumb, but she can't say that, so she has to tepidly try to she's part of a large Big Tent party. But yeah, I mean, even though that would be smart, I think political parties very rarely do be the smart thing.
Yeah, it's going to come down to 2022. If it's a blowout, right, for the DNC, yeah, I can definitely see it, right? But I think they're probably going to hold on. And honestly, I think they'll probably hold on to the Senate, or at least it'll be really close, in my estimate.
2022?
Yeah, because the GOP has to hold on to so many seats. I mean, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin.
Shapiro was talking about.
The Senate map really is not very good. We've talked about this.
Well, and the problem is that a lot of incumbent senators are retiring. So Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey, he's retiring. I think North Carolina, Burr, he's retiring. Yeah. Though his was he was kind of wounded forced. Animal. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, look, 2022 Georgia, we could the Republican parties are kind of in disarray, in both Arizona and Georgia, which we have Senate elections in there. And this is another thing. This is back to the cult of personality. These Republican parties in the states did very stupid things. In both states, they censored their own governor because they were and in Arizona, Sidney McCain for some reason. Look, if you're mad at this person, just ignore them. I don't understand you need to make a big show of the party taking a stance against either a governor or an individual because you don't like John McCain.
Well, let's just looking at the Senate map right here. I really see that there was two Senate seats that you would. Well, I think most would say realistically could flip from the Democrats' perspective. Arizona, right, and Georgia. I think that they're both. I would say Georgia more likely than Arizona at this point to flip. But from the GOP's perspective, there's quite a few seats. There's quite a few seats you'd have to worry about holding on. I mean, Iowa with down ballot races does not always vote GOP, right? Wisconsin, right? I mean, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida. I mean, obviously it's trending more to the right, right? But I mean, it's more seats that the GOP would have to hold on to, and at the same time put efforts into flipping, right? I don't think it's out of the question, given that the Senate is as close as it is, right? But for a big wave election, I think it's more likely to happen in the House, right? With the DNC, right? Just because like they have so much ground to keep a hold of, right? And then 2024. The Senate map looks a lot better, right? It was for the Democrat or for the Republicans, that is, right? So we'll see about that. I'm really curious to see how the party unfolds. Both really moving forward. Does the DNC go towards a direction of moderation? Maybe they keep a lot of things that they're unified on. Healthcare, right? Probably being the chiefest amongst them, right? And obviously from the GOP's perspective, because they're also a big tent party. Let's face it, right? Do they go towards the direction of populism, libertarianism, sort of a go between, right, where you kind of thread the line, maybe moderate Republican. But that being said, I think that's really what we'll probably chat about this a lot more. We just wanted to give an introductory podcast here, a little shorter than what we're trying to go for, but. We want to thank you guys. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Colby, for hosting here. Any final thoughts on where we stand on some things? Maybe what we're trying to do with this podcast in the future, the publication, really.
Share ideas. I mean, that's my perspective of it. I'm sorry I interrupted, Paul. You go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm glad you did. I mean, I think the way we set up the host was like we wanted to get the all kind of aspects of modern conservative movement. I mean, I guess we could have picked an actual like hardcore libertarian, but I mean, Clay kind of fills that role. I think I'm the more traditional kind of conservative, and I think Colby represents the more working class kind of, I think populist kind of wing of the party.
Right.
And so, clearly we're going to disagree on a lot of things, but hopefully we'll, come together and, we'll challenge each other on our ideas. Because, like we said earlier with the Hitching Post, like, the worst thing you can do is be in an echo chamber and, like, not let your ideas be challenged. So,
oh, right, 100%. And I think in the future we're also going to have guest commentators coming to you from, we know a lot of people in the local political scene that would be happy to join us for this one. Jim Baxa, man. We'll talk about local politics. There's a lot going on here in Lubbock that we'll probably talk about in the future with the ordinance and everything. For the Hitching Post, we're also going to try to bring in some guest writers, so people who've written a few columns for us. So just be on the lookout for that. We're really excited. We're going to be posting these podcasts bi-weekly. So expect one of these every two weeks, and so you try and get it on the website. Apple, you can check us out here hopefully soon on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Colby, for sitting down and talking with us. Thank you, all, and y'all have a wonderful day.
God bless America and God bless Texas.